today I thought I'd do something a bit more interesting and a bit of fun. So bear in mind that this is all a load of nonsense and nothing is true, but I thought I'd give my predictions for what would have happened in the 2020 Australian Grand Prix. Now, as I said, this is going to be a load of nonsense and it's all my opinion of what would have happened. So let's begin. Now, the issue is we don't know where the teams are after winter testing, as it's kind of not very accurate with all the timings. So looking at all the data and what's been said online, I've kind of come up with a rough grid order that I'm going to be basing this video on, along obviously with all the driver performances, reliability issues and my predicted crashes. So we're going to start off with qualifying, move on to the race, and then do the fastest lap and any retirements. And then I'm going to have a bit more fun and then predict 3 events or incidents that happened during the race weekend that would have happened, as just a bit of fun. But make sure you guys let me know down below what your opinions are, what you thought would have happened, and how much of this you think is a load of nonsense. Now we're going to start off with qualifying, and I thought for qualifying I'd only do the top 3 just because it's hard to predict, and obviously it wouldn't make that much impact for the actual result in terms of exactly like position to position where I put people. So I'm going to do the top 3 for qualifying, and going in with P3, I think Max Verstappen would put that Red Bull Honda in 3rd place. Now I think that the Red Bull looked really good in pre-season testing, but again just looked a tiny bit of a step behind Mercedes, and I think on qualifying pace alone I think the 2 Mercedes cars would beat Verstappen. So as I said there, I think the 2 Mercedes cars would do a 1-2 in qualifying for the Australian Grand Prix, and I think that Bottas would be in 2nd place, with Hamilton taking the first pole of the season, as he's such a good qualifier here and has such a good record at the Melbourne Park circuit. I think that it would be Mercedes front row lockout with Verstappen in 3rd for qualifying. Now for the race I've got a full grid order that I've come up with, but I think I'm only going to speak about the top 10, as these are going to be the most important positions, and I'll maybe dip into some of the individual drivers' races if they're outside the top 10 if I think anything interesting would have happened. So I believe that in 10th place Lando Norris would get a first point of the season, finishing in P10. Norris has really progressed throughout last season, and bar some reliability issues he would have finished much higher up the championship. He would have had many more points finishes, and I think here he'll start the season off with a great result in P10 for McLaren. Now that McLaren I don't think personally looks as strong as last year, but I believe again as last year they will go on stronger throughout the year and will improve. Now in P9 I think it will be Daniel Ricciardo scoring a good 2 points on his home race for Renault. Now that Renault again looked a bit interesting in pre-season testing, and it was very hard to see where it was compared to the midfield, but it looked to be in a similar place from last year, in and around McLaren, in and around Toro Rosso. So I think Daniel Ricciardo will have a relatively boring race in P9, and will sit around P8, P9, P10 for the majority of the race, and finish in P9, jumping Lando Norris in the last 10 laps or so. Now for P8. Now P8 I believe will be Lando Norris' teammate Carlos Sainz, who has actually been quite unlucky around this circuit in previous years, but I think after what you can put as a stellar performance last year in the 2019 season, I think Sainz will get off again for a good start for McLaren, finishing in P8 for the team. Again, I feel like he'll have quite a relaxed race, not really being troubled by anyone behind, and not being as quick as the cars that I've put in front of him. So moving on quite quickly then to P7. Now this is a hard one, but looking at the pre-season pace and what's happened with the car, I think that Sergio Perez will finish in P7, because that Racing Point was looking rather strong, or as I say, the Mercedes W10 was looking rather strong in pre-season testing. The car looked really stable. Perez seemed to be getting on with the car really well. It seemed to suit his driving style, and Perez is just again a really consistent performer, and I think we'll just, similar to Sainz and Ricciardo, have quite a boring race for those 3. They'll kind of be in their own little pace gap and will just kind of chill with themselves, but Perez again will have a really good start to the season, finishing P7 for Racing Point. Now in P6. Now this is one of the harder ones, and I have gone for Sebastian Vettel in this race though, however, as I believe Seb will not have the best of weekends, as he doesn't seem to have in Melbourne very often, and just in general for that Ferrari being a bit off the pace compared to Red Bull and Mercedes. Now I'm not saying Vettel's a bad driver or anything. I completely rate him, but I just don't think that he's going to have the best start to the season that he wanted. And with all the pressure building from last season, it's going to take him a few races to get into it and to start getting up to speed again. Now again, this might be a bit of a controversial one, but in 5th place I've put Alex Albon. Now I actually really rate Alex. I think he's a good driver. Obviously last year was his rookie season, and he did, I think, stepping up to Red Bull with all the pressure and everything. I think he did a stellar job. Obviously again, as I said, it was his rookie season, so I think that the kid's got a lot of potential, and that this year he'll really grow into his skin and start to secure podiums, start to get a bit faster, and actually start to challenge drivers like Leclerc, Bottas, and maybe Verstappen on a good day. So I think that Alex Albon will finish P5 again. Quite a quiet race for him. I think that he will be battling with Vettel and Leclerc for most of the race, but he will eventually beat Vettel, as Sebastian will drop off towards the end of the race. Now again, I've kind of given this one away. I think in P4 that Charles Leclerc will finish P4 for, I think, what Ferrari will see as a good start to the season for him, as their car seemed to be a bit off the pace in pre-season testing. I know that we don't actually know, but it looked to be, from all the technical analysis, it seemed to be just a bit slower than Mercedes and Ferrari, especially on the long run pace. I think that Leclerc will finish P4, and he'll have a good race, be challenged by Albon and Vettel. Those three will have a good scrap all throughout the race, but it just won't be on the top three's pace all race, and will kind of drop back into their own little bubble, away from the podium but away from the midfield as well. And I think that this will be the story of the season, or at least the start of the season, with those three, just because that Ferrari is not going to be on the pace as the other two cars in front, and the Albon will be still getting into his skin. But I hope by the middle of the season that the Ferrari will be on par with the other two cars, and that Albon would have finally gotten into his skin, given him a season and a half to get ready and really start to challenge for podiums and even race victories. Now the podium's a hard one, but I think I've got what I think will be the podium order. So in 3rd place I would put Valtteri Bottas. Now he did have a really good start to the season last year, but seemed to tail off after the halfway mark, and I think it will be the opposite this year. I think Bottas will have a slow start to the season this year, and will slowly grow more and more into the car throughout the season goes on, and will have a really strong finish to the season. I think it will be one of his weekends where he's just a bit off the pace in the race for no apparent reason, where he just kind of trails the top 2, the top 3 by 2/10, 3/10 a lap. So he's just never really there. He's just kind of hangs back in the wings. But I think he'll still have a really strong race. Obviously, be faster than 2 Ferraris and Albon, and just again a solid drive by him, but just not on the pace of the top 2. Now coming to the top 2. I believe that in 2nd place, Max Verstappen will be just behind Lewis Hamilton, who will take the first victory of the season, converting a solid pole to a victory. Now, the reason I think this is because the Mercedes looks stronger on long run pace than the Red Bull in pre-season testing, although we don't really know, but it looked that way. And I just think that Hamilton has something around this track. He can be extremely consistent around here. And I think towards the close of the race, I think Verstappen will be really putting him under pressure, trying to catch him up. But I think that Hamilton will take the victory. And for the fastest lap, I think that will go to Max Verstappen. Just due because I think in the final stages of the race, he'll be hunting down Lewis Hamilton to try and catch up with him, to try and take the race victory. But he will not. But he will set the fastest lap after pitting for a set of the soft compound tyre. Now, we move into the retirements of this race. Now, I think that We could be quite safe to say that Roman Grosjean will retire from this race, as he has done for the last 2 seasons running. I think he'll make it 3 in a row, and he will be the first retirement. Bit of a tough one, this one, and again, it's just a bit random, but I thought that Daniel Kvyat and Lance Stroll would have a coming together and would both retire about halfway through the race, which would make 3 retirements for this race, and those 2 would be the next 2 to retire. I don't think there would be any other retirements. I think 17 cars to finish the first race of the season is pretty average these days, with the reliability of these modern cars, and I actually don't think that anyone will have any major mechanical issues. Now, 3 interesting predictions for the race that I first said I would do. So my first one would be that there would be some sort of confusion with the F1 graphics on screen. Now, there always seems to be on the first race of the season, like we had last name a few years ago and things like that, and I think there'll be some sort of either new system like the tyre graphic that we saw last year come in and was completely broken. I think we'd see something like that for this race, or just the graphics being a bit broken and something funny or interesting will come up halfway through the race or during qualifying. Now, I think the second thing that I would predict for this race is that there would be a full course safety car. Now, I think that this would result from the Stroll-Kvyat collision and would really mix up the race, as I don't think there's many safety cars that have actually happened around this track, especially in recent years. So I would predict this for the second random prediction for the race. Now, my third one is going to be a botched pit stop, and of course, who else would I put it to be at the Australian Grand Prix than Haas? I think that Magnussen would have a botched pit stop, or a very slow pit stop, which is why he would finish so low down in the order and would be beaten by George Russell in the Williams, just because that he would lose so much time due to this pit stop or at the pit stop, just because Haas seem to have a bit of a running gag with it at Australia. They seem to mess it up each year just there and have no issues for the rest of the year, so I think that would happen again this year. Thank you very much everyone for watching. Please feel free to put your results down in the comments, and I'll try go through as many of them as I can, and I'll have a look and let me know what you think of my predictions, because we know it's a load of nonsense, but it is good fun, and there's a bit of rational thinking behind it, but apart from that, there's not. Hope you enjoyed.